A miracle is not an accident. It is not a lightning strike of good luck that hits one person and misses another. A miracle is a calculation. It is the inevitable result of preparation meeting opportunity. I used to believe that financial freedom was a lottery. I thought you either had to be born into the right family, invent the next big tech platform, or just get incredibly lucky with a risky stock bet. I was wrong, dead wrong. I was a certified public accountant. That sounds respectable on paper, doesn't it? My parents were certainly proud. But the reality of my life was a gray, suffocating loop. I spent 50, sometimes 60 hours a week sitting in a fluorescent-lit cubicle counting other people's money. I knew the tax codes inside and out. I knew how to hide assets, how to depreciate real estate, and how to maximize deductions. I was the guy making the rich get richer. But when I drove home in my 10-year-old sedan with the check engine light taping over the dashboard, I was going back to a studio apartment and a pile of my own unpaid bills. It was the ultimate irony. I was an expert in wealth who couldn't rub two nickels together. I was drowning in the middle of the ocean, dying of thirst. The turning point didn't come during tax season. It didn't come with a promotion. It happened on a rainy Tuesday morning when a man walked into my office who didn't look like my typical clients. Most of the people I dealt with were stressed, frantic, always checking their watches, always screaming about the IRS. But this man, let's call him Mr. Solomon, was different. He was calm. He moved with a slowness that suggested he owned time rather than fought against it. He was one of the wealthiest individuals in the state, a real estate mogul with a portfolio that made my head spin. Yet he wore a simple coat and spoke in a soft, measured tone. He was there to sign off on his annual returns. As I flipped through the pages, showing him that his net worth had increased by another 8 figures that year, I couldn't hold it back anymore. The frustration, the jealousy, the sheer exhaustion of my own mediocrity just spilled out. I looked at him and asked, barely keeping my voice steady, "Mr. Solomon, I see the numbers, I see the strategy, but I see the same numbers for other clients who work 3 times as hard as you and make half as much. What is the variable? What is the secret equation I'm missing?" He stopped signing the papers. He put his pen down, took off his glasses, and looked at me with eyes that seemed to hold a century of history. He didn't give me a stock tip. He didn't tell me to buy gold or invest in startups. He leaned forward and said 6 words that sounded ridiculous at the time. He said, "Show me your first 10 minutes." I was confused. I asked him what he meant. He told me that wealth isn't generated in the boardroom, and it isn't generated on the stock market floor. He said that for his people, for the lineage of successful merchants and scholars he came from, wealth was generated in the quiet vacuum of the morning. He told me that most people start their day in a deficit. They wake up, they grab their phone, they flood their brain with cortisol, news, emails, other people's agendas. They start their day reacting to the world. By the time they get out of bed, they have already lost. If you want to change your bank account, he said, you have to change the architecture of your brain. And the only time the cement is wet enough to reshape is the first 10 minutes after you open your eyes. I was skeptical. It sounded like self-help fluff. I wanted a tactical business strategy, not a morning routine. But then he made me a bet. He told me to try his specific 10-minute ritual for 30 days. If my life didn't show a tangible financial shift by the end of the month, he would double my fee for the year. If it did change, I would do his taxes for free. I was desperate, so I took the bet. That night, I went home with a handwritten note he had given me. It wasn't a list of affirmations. It was a strict 3-step protocol rooted in ancient wisdom, adapted for the modern world. It was about harnessing the subconscious mind before the conscious defenses kicked in.
The next morning, my alarm went off at 6 a.m. Usually, I would hit snooze twice, scroll through social media for 15 minutes, feel depressed about everyone else's perfect lives, and then rush to the shower. This time, I forced myself to stop. I sat up on the edge of the bed. The room was dark. The city outside was still quiet. Step one was what Mr. Solomon called the gratitude audit. But it wasn't just saying, "I'm thankful for my bed." That's weak. That's passive. He taught me that in his culture, gratitude is an active force. It's about acknowledging the flow of abundance so that you don't block it. I had to close my eyes and visualize 3 specific things I had now that money couldn't buy, but I had to feel the sensory details of them. I thought about the health of my lungs, the air filling them without a machine. I thought about the safety of my room. It sounds small, but as I focused on these things, the anxiety about my debt began to recede. It was physically impossible for the brain to be in a state of fear and a state of gratitude at the same time. By shifting my frequency, I was priming my engine. Step 2 was where it got intense. This was the vision imprinting. Mr. Solomon had explained that the brain doesn't know the difference between a vivid memory and a vivid imagination. If you visualize something clearly enough, your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters reality, starts to hunt for it. He told me to visualize my financial goal not as a number on a screen, but as a movie scene. I sat there in the dark and imagined myself signing a deed to a house. I felt the weight of the pen. I smelled the mahogany of the desk. I heard the scratch of the ink on the paper. I tried to generate the exact emotion of relief and power I would feel in that moment. At first, it felt fake. My logical mind kept screaming, "You're broke. This is a fantasy." But I remembered Mr. Solomon's warning. The logic is the guard dog. You have to sneak past the guard dog while it's still sleeping. I pushed through the resistance. I forced the image to become brighter, louder, more real. Then came step 3. This was the part that actually scared me. It was the command of the will. In the Jewish tradition, words create worlds. Abracadabra is actually from the Aramaic phrase, "I create as I speak." Mr. Solomon told me that I had to speak my intention out loud into the empty room. Not a wish, a command. I had to say, "Today, I am a magnet for opportunity. Today, money flows to me easily and unexpectedly." The first time I said it, my voice cracked. I felt foolish talking to an empty apartment. But I repeated it, and again. And by the third time, my voice dropped an octave. I felt a strange vibration in my chest. It wasn't magic, it was psychology. I was setting a coordinate for my day. I did this for 10 minutes. Then I got up, showered, and went to work. The first 3 days, nothing happened. In fact, things got worse. My car broke down on the highway, and I had to pay for a tow truck, putting me further into the red. I was furious. I wanted to call Mr. Solomon and tell him his miracle was a scam. But I remembered the bet. I had 27 days left. I gritted my teeth and kept going. On the morning of the 7th day, something shifted. I was in the middle of the vision imprinting, visualizing a new client, when I suddenly had an idea. It wasn't even an idea. It was like a download. I remembered a small, obscure tax credit for eco-friendly small businesses that had just passed in the latest legislation. Nobody was talking about it because the paperwork was a nightmare. But I realized that at least 30 of my current clients qualified for it, and they didn't even know it. I went into the office that day with a strange energy. I wasn't tired. I wasn't dreading the work. I pulled the files. I ran the numbers. If I filed these amendments, I could save my clients a combined total of $500,000. I drafted an email. Usually I would hesitate. I would think, Why bother? I don't get paid extra for this. But the morning routine had shifted something in me. I wasn't operating from scarcity anymore. I was operating from value. I sent the email to my top 10 clients explaining the loophole and offering to file the amendment for a percentage of the savings. By 2 p.m., my inbox exploded. People were calling me, ecstatic. One client, a guy who owned a chain of organic dry cleaners, was so happy he offered to take me to dinner. But that wasn't the miracle. The miracle was that for the first time in my life, I had taken initiative instead of orders. I had stopped acting like an employee and started thinking like a partner. Week 2 passed. The routine became addictive. I started waking up at 5:50 a.m. just to have more time. The 10 minutes stretched into 15. I started reading the biographies of the great financial titans during breakfast instead of scrolling through news feeds of disasters. I realized they all shared this trait. They controlled their mornings. They didn't let the world dictate their mood. But the real test came in week 3. This is where most people fail. This is where the rubber band effect happens. Your old self, your old habits, they don't just die, they fight back. I woke up on a Tuesday with a splitting headache. It was raining. The bed was warm. The voice in my head whispered, "You've been good. You can skip one day. It doesn't matter. It's just 10 minutes." I almost listened. I reached for the phone to turn off the alarm and go back to sleep. But then I saw the handwritten note from Mr. Solomon on my nightstand. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt heavy. I remembered what he said about the compound interest of discipline. He said that missing one day isn't just a flat line. It's a step backward that erases 3 days of progress. I dragged myself out of bed. I sat in the dark. I felt terrible. I couldn't visualize anything. My gratitude felt hollow. But I did it anyway. I went through the motions. And that, I learned later, was the most important session of all. Because doing it when you don't want to is what builds the callus on your mind. It proves to your subconscious that you are no longer a slave to your impulses. That afternoon, the phone rang. It was Mr. Solomon's executive assistant. She sounded urgent. My heart dropped. I thought maybe I had made a mistake on his return. Maybe I was getting fired. "Mr. Solomon needs to see you immediately," she said. "Please come to the penthouse." I drove there with sweaty palms. When I arrived, the office was different. There were other people there, lawyers, serious-looking men in suits worth more than my car. Mr. Solomon was at the head of the table. He waved me over. "This is the young man I told you about," he said to the group. They all turned to look at me. I felt small. I felt like the accountant with the taped-up dashboard again. Mr. Solomon looked me in the eye. "You sent an email to my associate, Mr. Vance, about the eco-tax credit." "Yes, sir," I stammered. "I thought he might qualify." "He did," Solomon said. "He saved $40,000, but that's not why you're here." He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over the city skyline. "I've been watching you. Not just your work, but your energy. The last few weeks, you've walked differently. You speak with more authority. You aren't the same desperate kid who asked me for a secret 3 weeks ago." He turned back to me. "We're putting together a private equity fund to acquire distressed commercial properties. We need a lead auditor who understands creative financing and tax efficiency. The partners wanted to hire a big firm from New York. I told them I found someone better, someone hungry." He slid a contract across the mahogany table. I looked at the numbers. The base retainer was 5 times my current annual salary, plus equity points. My hands were shaking as I picked up the paper. This was it, the miracle. It had actually happened. I looked up at Mr. Solomon to thank him, to tell him that the 10 minutes had changed my life. But he didn't smile. His face was grave. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper so the lawyers couldn't hear. "Don't sign it yet," he said. I froze. "What? Why?" "Because," he said, his eyes narrowing, "you haven't passed the final test." The 10 minutes in the morning opens the door to wealth, yes, but it also opens the door to something else, something dangerous. If you don't know how to close that door at night, this money won't just ruin you, it will destroy everything you love. I stared at him, the pen hovering over the contract. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. "The morning ritual generates energy," Solomon explained. "It turns you into a generator. But if you don't have a grounding wire, that energy builds up. It turns into arrogance. It turns into greed. I have seen men make millions with this technique and then lose their families, their health, and their souls within a year because they didn't know the second half of the secret." He took the contract back from me and placed it back in his folder. "Come back tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., he said. "Not to the office. Come to my home. I need to show you what is in the basement. Only then can you sign this." I left the building in a daze. I had the golden ticket in my hand, and it had been snatched away. What could possibly be in the basement of a billionaire that was a prerequisite for signing a contract? Was it something illegal? Was it some kind of cult initiation? That night, I couldn't sleep. The 10-minute routine had worked too well. It had brought me the opportunity of a lifetime, but now it felt like I had walked into a trap. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me. At 5:30 a.m., I was dressed. I drove to Mr. Solomon's estate. It was a fortress of stone and glass on the edge of the city. The iron gates opened automatically as I approached. I parked the car and walked to the massive oak front doors. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Mr. Solomon was standing there. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing an old, tattered prayer shawl. He looked tired, ancient. "Follow me," he said. We walked through the house, past priceless paintings and sculptures, down a narrow staircase that smelled of earth and old parchment. We went deeper and deeper until we reached a heavy steel door with a complex digital lock. He punched in a code. The door hissed and swung open. I expected a vault. I expected stacks of gold bars or servers full of data. But the room was empty, except for one thing in the center of the floor. It was a simple wooden chair, and sitting on the chair was a small leather-bound book that looked like it had survived a fire. "This," Mr. Solomon said, pointing to the book, "is the source of the advice. The morning routine you've been doing is just the key. This book is the engine." He picked it up carefully. "My grandfather carried this out of Europe in 1940. It contains the specific laws of money that have been kept within a small circle for generations. The morning routine primes your brain to receive these laws. But if you try to apply the laws without the right character, the laws will crush you." He handed me the book. "Open it. Read the first line." I opened the cracked leather cover. The pages were yellow and brittle. The writing was in a language I didn't recognize, but below it, someone had scrawled a translation in English ink that had faded to brown. I read the words out loud, and as I spoke them, a chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of the basement. The words weren't about money. They were about something much more terrifying. The text read, "To him who commands the morning, The demons of the night must bow. But beware, for when you command the light, the shadows get longer. I looked up at Mr. Solomon. What does this mean? What shadows? The money you are about to make, he said, his voice trembling slightly, will attract predators, not just people, but forces, problems you never imagined. The 10-minute morning gives you the sword to fight them, but you don't know how to use the sword yet. You've been swinging it blindly. He stepped closer. You have two choices. You can walk away now, go back to your accounting job, live a normal, safe life. Or I can teach you the advanced technique, the part of the 10 minutes that I kept from you, the part that protects you. But there is a price, he added. What price? I asked. Once you start the advanced protocol, he said, you can never stop. If you miss a single morning, you don't just lose the progress, you lose the protection. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I thought about my debt. I thought about the contract upstairs with the millions of dollars. I thought about the gray cubicle waiting for me if I said no. I looked at the old man. I looked at the mysterious book. Teach me, I said. Mr. Solomon nodded slowly. Very well. Sit in the chair. I sat down. The room seemed to shrink. Close your eyes, he commanded. We are going to redo your morning routine right now. But this time, we are going to add the missing ingredient, the ingredient that turns a millionaire into a legend. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Breathe. Now, listen to my voice. The first 10 minutes you learned were about getting. This next level is about becoming. And then he whispered the secret into my ear. It was a single sentence, a question actually, a question that shattered my reality the moment I heard it. He asked, if the money burns, does the man burn with it? The question hung in the damp air of the basement, heavier than the scent of old paper and dust. It wasn't a riddle, it was an accusation. I opened my mouth to answer, to say something logical like, of course not, I'm flesh and blood. But the words died in my throat. Mr. Solomon's eyes were drilling into me, peeling back the layers of ambition and greed I had wrapped around myself like armor. He saw the truth. He saw that for the last 6 months, as my bank account grew, I had shrunk. I had become attached to the outcome. I had become the numbers on the screen. You hesitate, Solomon said, his voice dropping to a gravelly register. That is why the shadows are coming. You have built a castle on a foundation of sand. You believe you are the castle. So when the tide comes, and it always comes, you will drown trying to hold the walls together. He walked around the chair, his footsteps echoing on the concrete. The advanced protocol, he continued, is not about visualization. It is not about affirmations. Those are toys for children. The advanced protocol is about death. I gripped the armrests of the wooden chair. Death? Every morning, Solomon said, stopping directly behind me, for the last 2 minutes of your 10-minute routine, you must kill yourself. What? Metaphorically, psychologically, he hissed. You must close your eyes and watch everything you love turn to ash. You must see your bank accounts hit zero. You must see the contract upstairs shredded. You must see your reputation destroyed. You must feel the humiliation, the cold of the street, the laughter of your enemies. You must sit in that fire until you stop screaming. Why?
I whispered, horrified. That sounds like torture. That sounds like manifesting failure. No, Solomon corrected sharply. It is inoculation. You fear the loss of wealth, so the fear controls you. The fear makes you weak. It makes you desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. Desperate men attract predators. But if you face the worst-case scenario every single morning, if you walk through the fire and realize that you, the consciousness, the spirit, the will, are still standing in the ashes, then you become invincible. You become the eye of the storm. He placed a heavy hand on my head. Now, close your eyes. We begin. I shut my eyes.
And first, all I saw was the darkness of the basement. Visualize the contract, Solomon commanded. The millions, the deal you are terrified of losing. See it clearly. I saw it, the crisp white paper, the bold letters, the promise of a new life. Now, Solomon's voice was a cold wind in my ear. Strike a match. I flinched. Burn it, he ordered. Watch it curl into black flakes. Watch the numbers dissolve. My heart hammered against my ribs. My chest tightened. It felt real. The panic was a physical blow. No, I can't lose this. I need this. It is gone, Solomon narrated relentlessly. The deal is dead. The investors walked away. They laughed at you. Your car is being repossessed. The bank is calling. Your friends, the new ones who like your money, they aren't answering the phone. You are back in the cubicle. The gray walls are closing in. The fluorescent lights are humming that headache-inducing tune. You are nobody. Tears pricked my eyes. The anxiety was suffocating. It was a visceral, gut-wrenching terror. This was my nightmare. Stay there, Solomon whispered. Don't run from the feeling. Sit in the ruin. Look around at the wreckage of your ego. I was breathing hard, sweating. I wanted to open my eyes, to run upstairs and check my phone, to confirm I was still safe. Now, Solomon said, his voice changing, becoming softer, stronger. Look at yourself in that vision. You have no money. You have no status. But are you breathing? I focused. In the vision, I was standing in the ruins of my life. I took a breath. Yes. Are your skills gone? He asked. No. Is your discipline gone? No. Is the fire inside you, the fire that woke you up at 5 a.m. every day to build this, is that gone? I paused. I felt a spark in the center of my chest, a defiance. No. Good, Solomon said. Now, realize this. You are not the castle. You are the builder. The castle can fall 1,000 times, and you can rebuild it 1,001 times. The gold is not the source of your power. You are the source. Something shifted in the darkness behind my eyelids. The panic began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The fear of loss evaporated because I had already lost it all, and I was still here. I felt lighter, dangerous. Open your eyes, Solomon said. I gasped, sucking in the basement air as if surfacing from deep water. The room looked different. The shadows in the corners didn't look like monsters anymore. They just looked like lack of light. Mr. Solomon was standing in front of me, holding the leather-bound book. He looked exhausted, as if he had poured his own life force into the ritual. That, he said quietly, is the secret of the kings. The 10-minute morning is 8 minutes of building the vision and 2 minutes of destroying the attachment to it. It makes you fearless. And in business, as in war, the fearless man always wins. He handed me the book. Take it. The specific breathing patterns and the visualization scripts are in here. Do not deviate. Do not skip a day. If you skip, the fear returns, and the fear will eat you alive. I stood up, clutching the book. It felt warm. Thank you, Mr. Solomon. He turned away, walking back into the gloom of the archives. Go sign your contract, kid, and remember, the shadows only get longer when the sun is rising. Keep your light steady. I walked up the stairs, my legs shaking, but my mind razor sharp. I emerged into the lobby of the building, into the bright, blinding sunlight of the real world. My phone buzzed. It was the investors. They were waiting in the conference room on the 40th floor. 5 minutes ago, looking at that notification would have sent a spike of adrenaline through my veins. I would have been rehearsing my lines, terrified of saying the wrong thing, terrified of blowing the deal. Now, I looked at the phone and felt nothing, just a calm readiness. If the deal went through, good. If it didn't, I would build something else. I wasn't the deal. I was the builder. I walked into that conference room not as a desperate entrepreneur begging for capital, but as a man who didn't need them. I sat down, looked the lead investor in the eye, and negotiated with a ruthless, detached precision that stunned them. I didn't flinch when they pushed back. I didn't blink when they threatened to walk. I knew I could burn it all down and be fine. They signed. The next 3 years were a blur of vertical ascent. The company scaled faster than any projection. The millions turned into tens of millions. The shadows Solomon warned about came exactly as predicted. There were lawsuits. There were betrayals by partners I trusted. There were market crashes that wiped out 30% of our value in a week. There were sleepless nights where the media tried to tear apart my reputation. For a normal person, the stress would have been crushing. It would have led to burnout, drugs, or a heart attack. But every single morning, while the rest of the world was asleep, I sat in my chair. I spent 8 minutes building the empire in my mind, visualizing the strategy, the growth, the victory. And then for 2 minutes, I burned it all to the ground. I watched the lawsuits bankrupt me. I watched the market crash take everything. I faced my worst fears daily in the safety of my morning silence. By the time I walked into the office at 8 a.m., the worst had already happened in my head. The real-world problems seemed trivial by comparison. A lawsuit? Just a piece of paper. A lost client? Just an empty slot for a better one. I became the stoic CEO the magazines wrote about. They asked for my secret. They asked about my productivity hacks, my diet, my reading list. I never told them about Mr. Solomon. I never told them about the basement. Until today. I was packing up my office, not because I had failed, but because I had sold. The exit was monumental, a sum of money that meant neither I, nor my children, nor their children would ever have to work again. I was putting the final items into a cardboard box when I saw it, the leather-bound book. The cover was worn now, the edges frayed. I hadn't opened it in years. I knew the protocol by heart, but I had kept it close, a talisman. I sat down in my executive chair, looking out over the city skyline. I was on top of the world, but a strange feeling gnawed at me. I hadn't seen Mr. Solomon since that day. I had sent checks to the old address, anonymous donations to maintain the building, but I never went back. I was too busy building the castle. I decided to take a drive. The old neighborhood had changed. Gentrification had smoothed over the rough edges. Coffee shops replaced the dive bars. But the old library building was still there, sandwiched between 2 glass condos like a stubborn memory. I walked in. The smell was the same, dust and silence. I walked to the front desk. A young woman was sitting there, typing on a laptop. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm looking for Mr. Solomon." She looked up, confused. "Who?" "Mr. Solomon, the archivist. He worked in the basement." She frowned. "Sir, there's no one named Solomon here, and the basement has been flooded for 20 years. It's sealed off. No one goes down there. It's condemned." A cold chill, colder than the one in the basement that day, ran down my spine. "That's impossible," I said, my voice sounding thin. "I was here 3 years ago. He taught me." I stopped. I looked down at the leather book in my hand. It was real. The weight of it was real. The success it had brought me was real. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Positive," she said. "I've worked here for 5 years. It's just me and the security guard." I nodded slowly. I turned and walked toward the door, my mind reeling. Had I imagined him? A manifestation of my own desperate subconscious? A ghost? I stepped out onto the sidewalk and opened the book. I flipped to the back page, a page I had never looked at before. There was an inscription, written in fading ink. The handwriting was jagged, sharp. "To the builder. The teacher appears when the student is ready to break. The teacher vanishes when the student becomes the master. The sword is yours now, but remember the price. You cannot stop. The moment you believe you have won, you have lost. The moment you think the light is yours to keep, the shadows will swallow you. Pass it on. S." I stood there on the busy street, the noise of the city washing over me. I looked at the passers-by, people rushing to jobs they hated, people worrying about bills, people trapped in the cycle of fear and desire. I saw a young man sitting on a bench nearby. He was wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit right. He had his head in his hands. He looked exhausted, defeated. He looked exactly like I did 3 years ago. I knew that look. The look of a man who is drowning in the gap between his reality and his potential. I clutched the book tighter. Mr. Solomon wasn't a ghost. He was a necessity. He was the intervention that happens when you reach the absolute edge of your limits. And now he was gone because I didn't need him to be the voice in the dark anymore. I had to be that voice. I walked over to the bench. My shadow stretched out long in the afternoon sun, falling over the young man. He looked up, startled. He saw the expensive suit, the watch, the aura of calm authority. He saw what he wanted to be. "Rough day?" I asked. He let out a dry, bitter laugh. "You could say that. Just lost my biggest client. Thinking about quitting. Going back to, well, it doesn't matter." I smiled. It was a sad smile, but full of power. "I know the feeling," I said. "I was sitting in a chair just like that not too long ago. I thought it was over." "How did you turn it around?" he asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I looked at the book. Then I looked at him. "It wasn't about working harder," I said, "and it wasn't about luck. It was about the first 10 minutes of the morning." "10 minutes?" he scoffed, skeptical. "What can you do in 10 minutes?" I sat down next to him. I placed the leather-bound book on the space between us. "You can change your entire reality," I said, "but there is a price." "What price?" he asked, his gaze fixated on the book. "Once you start," I said, echoing the gravelly voice that still lived in my memory, "you can never stop. If you miss a single morning, the protection lifts." The young man looked at me, then at the book. I saw the hunger in his eyes, the same hunger I had. "Teach me," he whispered. I nodded. I opened the book to the first page. "Close your eyes," I commanded. "We are going to fix your morning right now. The first part is about getting, but the secret is about becoming." As I began to speak, guiding him into the darkness to find his own light, I realized the final truth of Mr. Solomon's lesson. We don't own the wisdom. We are just the vessels. The gold doesn't belong to us. We are just the guardians. And as long as I passed the sword to the next warrior, the shadows could never touch me. Breathe, I told him, and listen carefully. To him who commands the morning, the demons of the night must bow. The cycle continued. The morning had begun.